Very exciting to speak with the two of you about Deadshot. I did not know what to expect with this film. Most films that you see that are set during the period of the Troubles go very heavy on the military type aspect of the bombings themselves that were happening all throughout the land. What you do here is you rely on your production design, your costume design, and your location to set us in that time period without focusing on the war, so to speak. And you focus on the individuals, how the circumstances affect specific individuals within the cycle of violence that was occurring for so long. And I love that approach.
That's great to hear. That's really wonderful to hear. I mean, that's definitely, we grew up with, on our mother's side of the family, we have quite a lot of Irish family, and we were always intrigued by films about, we've loved films about the Troubles, and the kind of stories that you're referring to, they're fantastic films, and they're always involving really interesting characters. But when we started working on this, we kind of felt that the politics of the Troubles and the specificity of the Troubles doesn't feel as relevant to today as perhaps the kind of the individual aspect of or impact that the violence and the people that were involved and caught up in this. Those stories feel incredibly relevant today. So we purposely sort of resisted getting too embroiled in the specificity of who creates the sides, or rather, like, whose side is right, in favor of perhaps what's really kind of eating away, what's creating this problem, and what's sort of what's causing these men to do these things, and that seemed to us far more relevant to today. That looking at the story almost from a kind of point of view of toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm. And we really see that play out, and this is where your casting is so important, bringing in Mark Strong as Holland, because Mark is so imposing anyway, in whatever role you put him in, that it's very easy to see how he could coerce Tempest. And this really comes out about how the cycle of violence is perpetuated, because you have people like Holland, you have people like Tom Vaughn Lawlor's Keenan, and they look for those opportunities and those people that really don't want to be part of the violent cycle, or they just want to start again, or they're lost. And they prey upon them. And we see that here so that we really can hone in on the individuals. And I love that.
We're very glad to hear that, because we thought it was very exciting to, dramatically speaking, we were really interested in characters like Keenan and Holland exploiting emotions, exploiting Michael's grief, and exploiting Tempest's guilt, and channeling those emotions, kind of taking advantage of them, and then actually using them for their own ends, for their own darker ends. And that felt a kind of very interesting path for us, dramatically speaking.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant way to go, guys, really. But then again, all of this, what makes the story itself work so well is the fact, the authenticity that you achieved in picking that mid-1970s, 1975 time period, and you steep us in it. We know at all times where we are in the historical timeline without having to tell us. And it's kudos to your production designer, to Tom Sayer, and to your costumer, Ellie Wilson. What I particularly enjoy and appreciate with their work, especially Ellie's, is 1975 was such a pivotal time in fashion. She could have gone off the rails so that the fashion, the clothing could have screamed out, okay, we're in 1975, we're in the UK. And she didn't do that. She brought in a very timeless look, which also coincides with what Tom does when you bring in your picture cars and all of this, because UK very much still had the vestiges, the visual vestiges from World War II, and while moving forward. So you've got this great eclectic blend of the eras coming together. And Tom and Ellie really embraced that and brought that to life.
Yeah, we were we were thrilled with it all. I mean, what we were trying to do with creating that timeless look. I mean, we showed Ellie lots of references and kind of talked about the film almost as an urban western to her. So because that's what we sort of felt, that if you look at it like an urban western and you see it as sort of guys duking it out, then you can't. It sort of immediately takes you away from the kind of uniforms that you associate with, with people involved in the Troubles and stuff, and what we all expected to see, we really resisted.
What were some of the influences and conversations like with Tom and Ellie to help build this world?
We were always going for quite a down feeling film that reflected reflected the very harsh economic times of the early 70s in London and the UK. I mean, at that time there were many strikes. There was a shortage of sugar. They couldn't even get sugar in cafes. I mean, there were bomb sites from the war that hadn't been developed, and they were just empty sites that children used to play in with burnt-out cars and fires. And we really kind of wanted to bring this almost collapsed city feel that you would perhaps in America associate with places like Detroit in the 70s or 80s. London was very similar in some ways. And so we stripped out all the colour. And very early on, we decided that we really wanted to just have very little colours apart from red, and really make the reds quite ominous when they appeared, and quite memorable. And so that was kind of an early decision we made, and it was great to work that through with Tom, and he worked that into all the sets. And even the picture cars, we were very careful not to have too many bright picture cars. So we kind of tried to control everything, really, but just in quite a natural way.
Well, and this is where your cinematographer, Matthias Ruud, his work is outstanding on this film. I'm guessing that you guys went with anamorphic lenses because of the time period. It helps give us this grit. I love that you have very, 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 very few extreme close-ups. You keep us in mid to wide shots so that we always are immersed in the world, but it's not being shoved in anybody's faces. It lets us focus on the individuals, which quite often are framed in the center of the screen. So we really can hone in on and make that emotional connection. But from the grit to the grain to the framing and the blocking, it all works beautifully. And I'm detecting a lot of either handheld or shoulder rigging here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we didn't actually shoot on anamorphic lenses. We shot on lenses. But we were shooting on the Sony Bennett, which was the first time actually that we've used that camera. We've historically, traditionally, we've favoured the Alexa, but really kind of he really championed the Sony Venice, and the thing that sealed the deal for us with that was the Rialto mode, because we were able to kind of to really shrink the camera down to kind of almost like just the size of a lens, really, with a little small packet on the back of it. I mean, it was obviously fed via an umbilical cord to the main camera, but what that allowed us to do was shoot in really, really tiny cars where, those 70s cars are small. And the locations, the real locations, like the location that the scene after the confrontation with Keenan, the scene where Catherine and Michael are sort of trapped in a kind of corridor. It's like a corridor kitchen / bathroom that you almost, we found it and we couldn't really believe that it existed because it was so 70s. It was sort of, it had a loo at the end, and then it had a sort of a kitchenette sort of thing, and it was basically in between two walls that effectively were a corridor. And we absolutely fell in love with the location because it kind of reminded us of, it felt like the characters themselves were kind of in a vice, and the walls were just closing in on them. And being able to shoot in a location like that with the Sony Venice and in Rialto mode was absolutely amazing. And yeah, we went with handheld partly because we love the energy that handheld brings. We wanted to tell the story in a very energized and kind of front-footed, bring the audience really to the front of their seats, so they're always kind of slightly gripped by or dreading kind of what's happening, what's around the corner, and creating that sense of spontaneity that you really associate with 70s movies.
Part of that spontaneity also comes in with your action. You've got some great action set pieces happening here, guys.
We actually shot this film. I mean, we had to hold on to those because we originally, like when we went into production, we had 5 weeks and 3 days, and because of some COVID delays, it ended up kind of growing a little bit, but to a certain extent, that time that it grew in was already, the shooting schedule was baked in to the 5 weeks and 3 days, so it was brutal how we were kind of jumping things around.
Just an amazing job, and to pull off a lot of those action sequences, I know how time-consuming they can be, and especially when you're dealing with small confined spaces, as happens in quite a few of the scenes that you have. So I am just beyond impressed with what you have pulled off here.
Thank you very much.
So one last question for you guys. I've got to ask you, this is your second feature now. This is a great departure from the Uninvited. So what did you each learn about yourselves as filmmakers, as storytellers, that you can now take forward into future productions?
A very good question. I think it was David. When we were making The Uninvited in Los Angeles, David Lynch used to have a radio show, and it was a great weather report on it for about 5 minutes, and it was one of our favorite moments of the day because he'd give a weather report, and invariably it was always the same weather report in Los Angeles, so there was nothing very interesting about the weather because it was always great. But then he'd always add some little David Lynchian aphorism or some little nugget of advice or pearl of wisdom, and one of them was water finds a way. And we really took that to heart on this film. We kept talking about water finds a way, and I know that sounds really abstract, but it was just trusting the story that it's going to take you where it needs to take you. And if you listen to the story and you listen to the characters, the water droplet works its way down, and eventually it becomes a stream, and then hopefully it takes you to the sea. And that's something that we hope to take forward onto the next film.
And would the other half of this brilliant team agree?
And working, one of the most satisfying things beyond constructing the world, which we really, really did enjoy, even on a shoestring, was working with such an amazing ensemble cast. Really, we really enjoyed. We enjoyed all the actors that we worked with. We really enjoyed the characters and exploring those characters in having more time to spend with the characters is something that we would love to take forward into the next film, because that definitely, if we could have had a bit more time with the characters in this film, then it would have been kind of interesting to explore some of the aspects of the internal aspects of their.
The character of Catherine, I'm fascinated by. I would love to see more about her and that dynamic with her father.
What kind of intrigued us with the female characters was how important women have been in the context of the Troubles, and how ultimately it's so often it's the women, because the men sort of destroy themselves. It's kind of very often the women who decide really whether this thing lives, whether this thing continues to have legs. And that's very much what we were trying to explore with both Catherine and Ruth, because obviously Catherine is left with this information that effectively puts her almost back in the driving seat that Michael was found himself in at the beginning, which is, your father is dead, and what are you going to do about it? And exactly the same is true of Ruth. You're sort of, it's just in reverse, but it's very much a mirror of what happened to Michael at the beginning of the story. So we sort of thought that was a really interesting way of ending the film, if we had been exploring kind of masculinity throughout the film, to sort of end it with the women. Mm-hmm. Because they're the only ones that live. They're the only ones that survive. So how are they going to survive, and what are they going to do about it?
Now, isn't that always the case? The women are the ones that survive?
Always, because men, the primitive species, we kind of destroy each other.
That's right. You got to give it to the women, guys.
We were trying.
You did. You did, but if you ever explore this era again, dig into a character like Catherine, like Ruth. I think you guys, in your hands, I think it would be brilliant.
That's very much what we want to do with the next one. We kind of want to explore it more from a, not the same subject matter or sort of world, but the next story, we're very intrigued by kind of female characters. We love women, so we have very important women in our lives, and we'd love to do something that explores kind of female characters.
Well, whatever you do, I can't wait to see it. And I hope we get to talk again in the future.
That would be great. We'd love that.
Guys, thank you so much. And job very well done.
Thanks very much, Debbie.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, you.